name is Marta Ceroni. I work at the Academy for Systems Change. And it's been a real pleasure in the past few months to work with my dear friend and colleagues at Co-Creative to organize and co-host this conversation on well-being, especially at the time that doesn't necessarily make us feel well. And so the inquiry here that we were all curious about is around the conditions that make us thrive as opposed to shrink at these times of complexity. And so, as individuals, but also as organizations, as people in our communities, as coalitions, movement builders. And so, this idea of starting connecting from a place, a source of feeling well and grounded and connected has been informing this series. And we can go to the next slide. I just want to share a little bit about the elements that we feel are in common to each of these conversations is that this inquiry on well-being and flourishing in systems with a systems perspective, we wanted to do in community. We didn't want to just be in our own separate offices or in our separate projects. We wanted actually to bring it in a broader community and specifically create a space of cultivation for folks that might be part of our respective networks at the Academy for Systems Change and Co-Creative and beyond, honestly. And so being in a spirit of learning, building relationships, and simply cultivating those nuggets of practices and wisdoms that make us really thrive, as I said, in everyday life and beyond. And today I am particularly excited to have here Lisette Jaimes and Adam Molinu Berry. And it's going to be a really special treat today. And I'm also super grateful to have here my dear friend, Melissa Darna. And just as an orientation to my organization briefly, maybe we can go to the next slides. Thank you. The way that we weave the well-being work in our everyday organizational life is to really focus on building relationships. So we have a relational approach to building programs. And so this collaboration is an example. And we focus on deepening leadership and systems change capacities. And as we transition to being together in this space, and we can go to the next slide, I just want to, okay, I was preparing for another slide, sorry. I just want to make sure that as we move to the next piece, we are all inviting into this space, whatever we have in our environment, since the pandemic, we have known that we live more and more virtual lives. And so anything that is happening for you or around you, in your family, in your space is welcome. And also we want to make sure that you feel invited to participate in all the dimensions of participation in this webinar. We are going to meet for 90 minutes and we are recording, as you know, this session. So I think maybe as a grounding, I have shared enough and I'd love to invite my friend Melissa to take the next piece. Thank you. Welcome again.
Thank you so much, Marta. It's wonderful to be with you all. I see some faces that are familiar and some names I don't recognize, and it's always a joy to come together in this way. So I'm Melissa. I work at Co-Creative. We're delighted to co-host this series with our friends at the Academy. And for those of you who aren't super familiar with our work, we say that we help people who don't know each other and sometimes may not even like each other to come together around a shared purpose and a vision for how we could build better futures and think creatively and expansively how we might innovate the intervention points to for well-being to flourish and for all of us to thrive. For us at Co-Creative, that means that we work on an array of different topics across sectors, but all of it in service to our belief that we can really only be our best selves when everyone else has the opportunity to live in a world where they can also be their best selves. And so that for us means equitable and sustainable economies and ecologies around the world. We'll go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So that's a brief introduction about us. Of course, you can learn lots more on our website or send me an email. We wanted to start, as we often do in these sessions, by finding out who is with us in this room. So I am going to put a link in the chat and invite you to click on it. Should take you to a screen where you will see these prompts that are on the slide. We're inviting you to share your name and one gift that you have brought to our session today, a place where you're joining from so we can get a sense of the geography that might be similar or different from where we all are joining from. And then one word that consistently informs your life and your work. It is a value that you hold. Please let me know if you're having any trouble locating the polling tool. Give folks just a couple of more minutes. I see that responses are still coming in. I'll start to share my screen. Someone here is bringing warmth. Oh, thank you so much. Curiosity, Anna, you're coming with a learning experience. Todd, being loved now. An open mind, Claudia, thank you so much for that gift that you're bringing us. Larkin's bringing curiosity, playfulness, empathy. Madeline, thank you for sharing your gift of time. All right, so where are folks coming from? We have Indiana, Brooklyn, Shenandoah, Flagstaff, Pennsylvania, Iowa, New Hampshire, California, Washington, the other Washington, Texas, Virginia, some friends from the Wiyot territory in Northern California along the coast, Michigan, Brooklyn. Wonderful. Thank you so much, y'all, for spending time with us across these time zones. And here are the values that you shared. We'll give all of this back to you as a gift when I send the post-session materials. What a wonderful group of people to spend the next 90 minutes with. Thank you so much for being here. I have the great privilege of introducing Luzette and Adam. I think someone's going to share the slides for me. Thank you so much. Before I do, though, I want to invite us to just take whatever is sitting around on your desk, and by that I mean your mental desk, maybe the workspace where you are, and just like package it up and set it aside. So maybe there's an email that just came in that you feel like you should respond to, or you're aware of something that needs to go on the shopping list, all kinds of things could be in the periphery. And so I just want to invite you to become aware of those things and then set them aside for the time that we have together. And I'm going to welcome our guests. So Luzette and Adam were so gracious, and they said that I could make anything up that I wanted to share about them in this introduction. But I wanted to share some things that were actually true. These are the things that are relevant for me, and we'll send more information about them again in our follow-up materials. So Luzette, we have worked with her for about 5 years now, actually. And when I think of her, I think of a healer, a weaver, and more recently, a very loving dog mother to a gorgeous dog whose name is Olaf. Luzette's work focuses really on expanding human awareness and promoting well-being for individuals, for society, and also for our planet. Nurturing the earth is one of the values that she brings to her work. I think of one of her superpowers as being this ability to guide learning experiences that allow other people, including myself, to see the interconnectedness of ourselves in relationship to each other and also to our planet. And she works to create the conditions for a thriving world. Now, Adam recently posted on LinkedIn that he has a massive crush on Co-Creative. And I can say actually that the feeling is truly mutual. He has a natural ability to make people feel welcomed and deeply seen. His work is about creating brave spaces to shift consciousness and really activating people to be the powerful change makers that we have the potential to be. When I think of Adam, I think of a warm and gentle guide and also a muse. And I know that you will experience him as that today. He's someone who accompanies leaders in their journeys of self-discovery and holds space to cultivate inspiration, motivation, and joy, even when things are challenging or complex. So I've said enough. On behalf of Co-Creative and our partners at the Academy, I am truly, truly honored to welcome Luzette and Adam. And I'm so grateful that they accepted our invitation to inquiry and agreed to join us today. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And I'll turn it over to our hosts.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Marta. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Adam and I are super excited to share some of our thinking and feeling and experiences here with you all. We first want to thank all our teachers, Schumacher College, New Ventures West, among others, and also our partner, Julie Engel, whose knowledge and example have really impacted the way we understand well-being and we live our lives. I'll walk you through the flow that we've created for our conversation today. We are in a webinar on well-being in complexity. So we thought, let's start by defining well-being, and then let's go and explore characteristics of complex times. What does it mean for all of us as a group, actually? And Adam and I decided to pick one big thing that has been a game changer for us in terms of understanding the neurobiology of our well-being, in particular, the role of the nervous system in our day-to-day, in how we experience life, in how that affects our well-being. And we're gonna have some breakouts and a plenary around these particular topics. And then we're gonna close with sharing a couple of tools, one on the Mindfulness for Changemakers community and the Wellbeing Wheel, where we hope is a space and a tool that you can use to practice and cultivate your well-being. So let me start with how we define well-being. And please know, this is a working definition. This is based on our work with change makers and well-being during, over the past decade and more, particularly in my case with the Ashoka Network and our fellows around the world. So when we're talking about well-being, we're really thinking about a dynamic model. It's not just one thing that is static and never changes, but it has several variables that are interdependent and are very nuanced and are very connected also to our subjectivity. So each of us has a particular a space where our well-being might be different from others. And the working definition we have is well-being as the quality of life experience that we have moment by moment. We say that well-being is impacted by our capacity to be resilient and our capacity to be with what life presents, what happens, right? And here I'm not saying that we need to develop capacity to accept and submit to systems, like oppressive systems, that sometimes we're born into. But what I'm saying is that we can develop the capacity to be resilient in the face of difficult circumstances and some of those systems, and bring about change if needed. All of this model is happening, all of this well-being is happening within the space of systemic conditions. And in this case, we use the social determinants of health as an example, and I will give more details about it later on. And we also look at what we call dimensions of well-being, which we have identified as based on our studies on basic human needs, going from Maslow to Manfred Max Neff at the individual and collective level. So what are our basic human needs that really, when we work with them, we can impact our well-being at the individual and to some extent collective levels as well. So I'm going to give more details about these two systemic conditions and dimensions of well-being in the next slides. Before I go there, I want to share about the context that we see well-being is happening in, and how I said, this is an interconnected set of variables that influence one another. And so when I'm thinking about individual well-being, I'm thinking, physical, mental, emotional, right? All of that is connected to our community well-being, which includes my family, my neighborhood, my pet, the landscape around me. All of these and their relationships as well make up the collective well-being, which includes our societies and our world. And all of this is embedded in systems that we're born into, systems that we create, systems that many of us want to change. And also the power dynamics that are within those systems. And so things like who controls the narrative, who controls resources, who makes decisions, who benefits, all of those questions, even though we might not even pay attention, are constantly impacting our well-being. And on top of that, as individuals and in our families and in our countries and as groups of humans, we carry what is called intergenerational gifts or resilient traits, as well as some trauma traits that we have inherited. And we've learned way more about it through epigenetics and how they have discovered how these inherited traits can impact our day-to-day and how we feel and how we show up and what we feel is right and wrong and so on. And so we're keeping in mind all of these variables. So it's just not one thing, it's many of them and the relationship of all of them. Lastly, I want to say that all of this is happening within the boundaries of our planet and within the connection that we have with nature. And what we breathe, right, is the oxygen produced by trees. We drink the water of our rivers and our water streams. We eat the food that the soil and the land produces, right? So sometimes we think planet and nature are like somewhere over there, but we really cannot really exist without it. So it's kind of like almost not only extrinsic, but intrinsic as well. So I want to give more examples. Oh, before I jump into today we're going to be focusing quite a lot in the individual space, particularly in the human nervous system. But okay, we could be focusing on any of these areas very easily as well. So let me give you a little bit more of an example of how systems affect our well-being. And in particular, I'm going to illustrate how systemic conditions can be seen through the social determinants of health model. And this is the one used by the World Health Organization. Many of us probably are familiar with it, so I'm not going to stay too long here, but I'm going to give some good examples. So when we look at the healthcare access and quality, we're looking at, for example, equal access to healthcare, access to primary care, health insurance coverage, health literacy. When we're looking at education access and quality, we're looking at educational opportunities that help people develop themselves in a way that supports them functioning well and thriving in the world, in their context. And when we talk about social community context, we're talking about the quality, the level and quality of cohesion within a community, the level of participation of the citizens, so civic participation, the rate of discrimination, the conditions in the workplace or incarceration practices that that particular community has. When we look at the economic stability, we look at, does this person or does this family have economic security in a way that they have a stable, sufficient income and other resources that help them meet their basic needs, whether it's with access to quality jobs, equal opportunities for all, affordable and nutritious food, etc. And lastly, when we look at neighborhood and built environment, this includes access to quality housing, access to transportation, availability of healthy foods, air and water quality, and the space that we live, like the crime and violence, how safe is it? So all these determinants are an example of how well-being is happening also externally, but is impacting us all the time through those systems. And here, the 8 domains of well-being I mentioned earlier, based on human basic needs, we look into mindsets first, and this refers from our perspective, this refers to our worldviews, our belief systems, which include the values that shape our behaviors. So important questions here are, how do my worldviews, belief systems, and values contribute to my well-being and that of others? And what practice do I have to develop awareness about my own mindsets and how they're helping me or not in my well-being and in the well-being of others? When we look at the physical category here, we're talking about the body. We're talking about the importance of exercise, a good diet, having good sleeping patterns, good balance between rest and activity. Kind of like it's the more mainstream understanding of well-being. A lot of the wellness industry has been developed around this one. And today we're going to actually be focusing in particular about how our nervous system impact our reactions, our interactions with others, and our overall well-being. When we look at the category of mental and emotional health, we are looking at how is it that we can have a state of mind that is characterized by emotional well-being and behaviors that help us function well, be well in the world. And this points, for example, to how we relate to our emotions. This is not about always being happy, for example, not being under the tyranny of happiness. Everything needs to be happy and in harmony. But rather is pointing to our ability to experience, acknowledge, and be with a wider range of emotions and not being taken over by those emotions, right? So I can experience sadness, I can experience grief, allow myself to be with those feelings and hopefully have a community that supports me through those processes. But I'm not going to harm myself or others in the process, for example. In the meaning space, this refers really to our ability to express ourselves in many ways, and most people do it through work, in a way that connects us with something larger than ourselves. When we have meaning in our lives, we experience a sense of fulfillment, feeling alive, It connects us with a sense of purpose. Some people call it a spiritual and transcendence dimension. And then we move into the contribution space. And we also call it change making because of our background in change making. But research shows that being of service to others positively affects our health. It gives us a sense of meaning as well. And here I wanna make a pause and explain, because we work so much with change makers, we have noticed through the years, and that's one of the points we have worked with a lot with them, is that a lot of change makers keep trying to generate social impact and creating good in the world, but they experience a lot of burnout, many of them. And so this is when some change makers might start to feel disconnected from themselves, from others, despite the contribution work. And this is where the invitation to really look at a holistic view of well-being is important, because where is the meaning? Where are the social relationships? Where is the mindset that is, making you sacrifice to create more social impact? So this is very important to take notice of how all these categories are interconnected. Then we look at relationship and community. This is the capacity to have healthy relationships, develop high quality connecting with others with a sense of belonging. So human beings are neurologically wired to be social beings. We exist in relationship to others. And there is some research, and in particularly this really caught my attention a few years ago, when it says that lack of social relationships has the same effect on health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I can put one of the articles about it in the chat later. And here in the United States, Vivek Murthy, the US Surgeon General, has been creating a huge campaign and very outspoken about the mental and physical health impacts of loneliness. There is a complete study about it. I can put it up later also in the resources. So moving on to right livelihood. This refers to our ability to generate income and access to resources that allows us to meet our basic needs. And that at the same time, we can do work in a way that provides us with a sense of meaning and connects us with purpose and contribution. So there is research that shows that once you reach a certain level of income, it doesn't matter if you get more money, if you're not filling up some other needs like meaning, contribution, physical health, you won't really experience much more happiness than what you already got. And the last one, nature. This one is the relationship that we have with it and how we connect to it, how we can recognize that our nature is to be nature, and that that relationship is really one to pay attention, and we couldn't exist without. The last thing I want to say about this slide is that we can look into these 8 different dimensions and look into our role in having agency or access in the way that we relate to all of them. And so some people may have a lot of access. I'll give you my own personal example. I live in the forest. I have a lot of access to the forest and being in nature. But sometimes my agency is very little and I don't go so much there because in my head, I have the story that I have no time, that I have too many meetings. And so my agency gets shortened by even though I have the access. So it's important for us to know when is my role in being able to exercise my agency or not, even though I have or not access to it. So to conclude, this is a model we've been working with. Well-being is dynamic, interdependent, and very nuanced. So I'm gonna stop here and invite you into a short reflection for yourself. What is standing out for you right now? What is standing out for you right now? I'm gonna give you a moment to think about. You can share in the chat if you like, or if you wanna unmute, you're welcome to unmute as well. What is standing for you right now? What is standing out? Any feelings about what I just shared? Any thoughts? Any reactions? So let's see here. Robin says, there are more domains of well-being that I have ever thought about. Indeed. And we don't even know which ones we're missing here that we're still haven't learned, right? We don't know what we don't know as humanity. Thinking about right livelihood as more than just financial resources. Yeah, our way of living, our way of life. I love your graphic of the layers and scales about well-being. Oh, Sarah, yeah, this is really important because for us, you know how the conversation in the industry of wellness speaks very much about how you feel and how your body looks like and your yoga pose and all these things. And I think that's really important, but it's very individualistic and we can't separate systems and relationships and our individual well-being. My well-being absolutely depends on everyone's well-being, including our planet, very much. Okay, so I'm gonna keep letting ourselves read. Thank you so much for your thoughts. We are part of nature, not us versus nature, indeed. Our systems don't resource or support these domains of well-being particularly well, especially thinking of meaning, contribution, and relationship and community. Great. Thank you all. I'll leave them in the chat. We can keep reading, and I'm gonna pass it over to Adam to take us a little bit into narrowing down to like, okay, let's look at the physical and our nervous system. What do we do with it? So Adam, I'm gonna pass over to you. Thank you all for listening and sharing.
Thank you, Lou. Really appreciating the comments. Yeah, the models came through many conversations, many models that we studied, many teachers. So just it's not to say that we came up with these things. You know, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, just to be really clear about that. And welcome any input that you have. And thank you, Lou, for guiding us through such a beautiful experience. I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see that? Is that it? I just need a thumbs up or
yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Beautiful. So this is the model that Lou shared with us, a dynamic model for well-being. And the area that I'd love to play with you in is on the resilience and capacity to be with what life presents. This is something that was really big for me in my I'll say human development, in my ability to human better, and something I'm very excited to share with you all. We'll be talking about the neurobiology of well-being, and we'll specifically be looking at the nervous system, which looks something like this. It's a beautiful thing. There's actually a couple of nervous systems out there in the world that have been fully dissected. You can find them. They look a bit gory, and apparently it took thousands of hours to separate all the nerves from the body. Quite an amazing thing. And the nervous system is always scanning for safety or danger. There is a part of us that is always online and always paying attention to safety and danger around us. And this is a throwback to our evolutionary days, the days that we were chased by, I don't know, dinosaurs or tigers in the bush. You know, our nervous system would be the thing that caught this and said, right, time to run. And this beautiful model is called the window of tolerance, developed by Dr. Dan Siegel. It's a really useful way of looking at how we can function with the nervous system. So this box here represents our nervous system, and it represents our nervous system's capacity to deal with things that happen. So in any given day, you know, kind of we're minding our business, things happen, and sometimes things happen that excite us. So, you know, it could be that I get an email that I don't really like, the tone of which doesn't feel really good. So my blood pressure goes up a little bit, or it could be that I get some bad news that doesn't feel great and kind of it goes down a bit. And when it goes up, it's called hyperarousal. When it goes down, it's called hypoarousal. And as long as I'm kind of going up and down within the window of what my nervous system can manage, I'm absolutely fine. It's not a big deal. However, once in a while, something will happen that's so intense that it actually goes beyond my nervous system's capacity to deal with it. And then we might escape here. And escaping from the hyperarousal perspective is usually excessive activation or energy. This is kind of what fight or flight looks like. So when people talk about fight or flight, it's usually something's happened that has activated us gotten us a bit too excited, and we're outside our nervous system's capacity to deal with it in a normal way. Conversely, if something happens that gets us a little too down, we go into hypoarousal, and that's more like the freeze response, being emotionally flat, lack of energy and response. Another way of looking at this is if you all remember the dial-up days, dial-up internet days, if you wanted to kind of stream a movie, you'd have to kind of pause and wait for the buffer to grow so that you could see a bit of the movie. And if you kind of ate through all of the buffer and the movie hadn't finished, everything would freeze until the buffer was back. So that's another way of looking at it. The window of tolerance is basically our buffer. If we're within our window of tolerance, we're showing up in a really good way most of the time. If we're outside of our window of tolerance, you can expect some different behaviors. We are particularly interested in this beautiful thing here called the vagus nerve, and it goes from the bottom of the brain, kind of the brain stem, all the way down behind the heart into the belly and guts. And it is the beautiful, beautiful nerve that is responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. So if someone is in fight or flight, it's usually a vagus nerve thing. I mean, obviously there's more to it, but we're keeping it simple for the sake of just illustrating the point. And this is an important part of all of this. So the state of our nervous system affects our ability to access the more developed parts of our brain. So again, this is a simple way of explaining it, but the oldest brain that developed for us a long time ago is the reptilian brain, before mammals and humans were around. And this part of the brain is very much connected to instinct, dominance, and survival. So we have that within us, the reptilian brain. Many, many moons later, we evolved the mammalian brain. So mammals came onto the planet and the mammalian brain evolved. And this kind of involves things like feelings and emotions. So when we're in our mammalian brain, we're in that kind of space. And then the newest part of us, the human brain, is the place that holds language, ideas, concepts, artistic visions. So when we're kind of getting up into fight or flight, say something's happening like I'm late for a presentation and the photocopier isn't working and I need to make some photocopies, I might start kind of moving out of my human brain into my mammalian brain, start feeling some big feelings and emotions. So maybe I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling angry, might kick the photocopier. If things really escalate and it gets totally out of hand, I'll move into my reptilian brain. And this is when I get the sledgehammer out and start hitting the photocopier, or just screaming or shouting, whatever it is. So it's so important to understand this, friends, because this kind of depersonalizes seeing people when they're in fight or flight or fear. When we see people with road rage, they have actually lost access to their human brain. They're not necessarily bad people. They just don't have access to their full faculties. And I say this to say that if you're in a complex negotiation with someone or in a tense situation work-wise, there's something that you care about, that they care about, and you can see that they're not thinking clearly, that's not a great time to try and make your point or finish an argument. It's a really good time to find a way to let that person get back into their human brain. And we'll be talking about how to do that, right? So we just really want to depersonalize what these kind of fight or flight states look like. I'm going to share another simple model with you. This one is developed by Deb Dana. It's called the polyvagal ladder. It relates to the vagus nerve, and it's based on research by Dr. Stephen Porges. So when something goes wrong, the body's first reaction to threat is usually what's called the social engagement system. That's like the first rung of the ladder. And so something will go wrong, and we might start by requesting support. So I might say, hey, photocopy is not working. Do you mind if I use your printer? That'll be kind of the first level of the engagement ladder. It might look like negotiation. Hey, can we shift things around so I have more time to do my photocopies? It might look like appeasement, me just agreeing to someone for the sake of, so that we don't escalate further. There might be some lying involved or some manipulation. There might be some control involved or some passive aggressiveness. So when our body first senses a threat, the first layer, the first rung of the ladder is the social engagement system. If I use the social engagement system and I still haven't addressed the threat, I might go down to the next ladder rung, and that's fight, flight, or freeze. We'll be talking a lot about that today. And fight, flight, or freeze might look like preparing for action. So you might notice that your heart rate is quicker. You might notice that your breathing is faster or more shallow. You might feel greater muscle tension in your body. So for me, I know when I'm moving into fight or flight because I'll start like leaning in, I'll start speaking faster, my eyes will widen, I might raise my voice. I can feel some armoring in my muscles, in my arms and chest, almost like I'm getting ready for a fight. That for me is the first sign that I'm going into fight, flight, or freeze. And it's really, really useful to develop the habit of interoception. Interoception is the capacity to look inside our body and be aware of some of our tells, some of the signatures of us going into fight, flight, or freeze, so that we can try and reverse that. If I'm in fight, flight, or freeze and I still haven't addressed the challenge, I might go down to the last rung of the ladder, which is immobilization or shutdown, sometimes called fawn. And this usually looks like numbness, dissociation, lethargy, resignation, despair. This is usually when we're at the bottom of our capacity to deal with the world. And if we're feeling any of those things, it's really not a great time to try and finish the conversation or prove a point. It is a perfect time to just take a bio break and go for a walk, to do anything other than be there. Because at this point, we do not have access to our neocortex, the prefrontal cortex, that allows us to make great decisions and to connect and to use sophisticated language. We're probably in our mammalian brain or at our worst in our reptilian brain. And so it's just a really, really important that when we're doing, working with complex systems and systemic leadership, that we're aware of the biology of that and how important it is. It's not about people being good or bad. It's about the nervous system reacting and our capacity to work with that. So when we're in fight, flight, or freeze or collapse, we don't have access to our full mental faculties, the kind of more human parts of the brain. And our work is really to recognize the signs in the body, our own unique tells, to consciously bring our nervous system back into a state of balance. And we'll be talking about that, right? So really, when we start to identify the signs that we're moving into that place, we need to pause things and find a way to get back to the wholeness. And it's so important when we are working with others and we see them escalate. We see that the emotions are flaring, that they're starting to kind of widen their eyes, speak faster, speak more intensely. It's so important that we take a pause at that moment. And one of the tools that I am practicing, I'm not perfect at it yet, but I'm getting better at it, is I'll just say, "Hey guys, I need a break." I'm not going to point at the other person and say, "It looks like you need to calm down or take a breath." That's never worked. I'll say something along the lines of, "Hey, I need a bio break," or I just need to go for a walk," or "I just got to go get something from my office," but something to de-escalate, to create a break so that I can come back. And when I come back, then I can say, "Hey, why don't we take a breath together," or something. So just to be really aware that if we want great results in our work together, it's really important to be watching out not just for our own nervous systems, but the nervous systems of those around us. So what happens when we're in freeze, fight, or flight? These are some of the things that you might feel in your body. Kind of tunnel vision, difficulty breathing or shallow breath. You might have butterflies in your stomach or heart pounding. There might be this kind of feeling of, oh, I want to throw up, a bit of nausea or diarrhea. You might really need to pee. You might find that your legs are shaking, your muscles are tense. These are all really good signs that we need to start paying attention to something other than what we're doing right now. We need to start paying attention to our bodies. And in a kind of mental and emotional scape, these are some of the things that you might experience. So for me, overdrive, that's really very common for me. Maybe a bit anxious. I can get a bit supercharged. Sometimes I can get overwhelmed if it's happening a lot. So if I start to notice some of these things in my kind of mental emotional field, if I start to get a bit restless or scattered, then it's a really good time for me to pause and kind of really see what I can do to settle. So I've given you a lot of information, and what we would love for you to do is to kind of really just journal, make a note, or write in your computer, or just even a mental note. Like, how do you feel when you're in fight, flight, or freeze? How do you feel? What are some of the things you're noticing? I'm going to give you a few minutes, and what I'll also do is I'll show this slide about what happens in the body, and I'll show this slide about what happens in the mental, emotional space for input. And I think Lou is going to play some lovely music in the background, so we'll just give you a few minutes for this. Yeah, Claudia's saying she can't think straight. That's a really common fight or flight. And that's literally not being able to access the neocortex, right? The front of the brain. Yeah. Even in fight, I want to flee. Absolutely, Melissa. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how contradictory the body and the nervous system can be. Absolutely. Anxious and shaking, absolutely. Yeah. I remember when I was younger, doing anything publicly would really make me shake. It was so embarrassing. But it was my nervous system basically saying, danger, 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 high alert, watch out. Yeah, words come out at random and forget to say what I need to say. Absolutely. That's a classic. Um, hiding, avoidance, distraction. Yeah. One of the ways that I see this happen a lot, friends, is when a lot of people in a meeting start looking at their mobile phones. This is when I start to become aware that something's been said that's making people uncomfortable, and they'd rather kind of find a way to not be there. Yeah, concentrate, shivering, restlessness, too much energy. Yep, angry, overwhelmed. Yeah, tightness in my chest. That's a big one for me as well, Russ. If I start to kind of get that tightness in the chest and the constriction in the throat, that's really a big sign for me. I'm going to show the next slide as well, just for you to kind of look at the mental emotional part here. Heart palpitations, yeah, that's a really good one. Shortness of breath, weak limbs, feeling faint, instantly craving movement. Yeah, me too. If I start kind of wanting to be somewhere else or get up and walk around, I mean, sometimes it actually helps, sometimes it doesn't. Can't control thoughts, very common as well. Yeah, needing to move as well. Beautiful. Tightness in the chest. And in the mental emotional space, I mean, obviously it's different for different things. But things like my mind won't stop racing or my mind keeps going over the same thing. When when I'm trying to sleep and my mind is trying to solve something, it's one of the most infuriating things. Like even when I try and bargain with it, like absolutely, I hear what you're saying. We'll do this when we wake up. It often doesn't have the entire yeah the hoped for result. I'm going to name also hyper-aware. This might be more common in people with a background in trauma, but this is very much me. When I'm in fight or flight, I can start to notice that my peripheral vision is a lot more active. I can see movement a lot more. I can notice people's expressions a lot more. So if you find yourself hyper-aware, it's something to pay attention to. Yeah. Buzzy, beautiful. Great, friends. You're going to have a moment to kind of debrief all of this, but I'm going to move on and just speak about triggers for fight or flight, right? So what is it that actually puts us into fight or flight? Here are some of the usual suspects. I'll start with bad drivers. I think we can all universally agree that bad drivers are a shortcut to fight or flight, usually fight in my context, unless they're the ones fleeing, in which case I will chase if I'm not in an integrated space. But something like too many things to do, that's one of my favorites. Or when something is supposed to happen and then it doesn't, something that I really care about, that can really start triggering me. Feeling pushed into a corner. The biggest for me is when I see someone being mean to someone else, that I have to be really careful about not kind of getting into my, protector mode, because then I start to lose all useful responses at that point. So again, I just want to give you just a few minutes to look at what are your triggers. Just in your journals, note down what are some of the things that happen for you that drive you absolutely up the wall and that are more likely to put you into fight, flight, or freeze. And again, feel free to share in the chat anything that feels very obvious to you. Yeah, feeling overwhelmed. Yeah, lack of time, too much to do, other people's negative energy. I think these are really common in office scenarios, right? I think it's a 2024 thing, too much to do. It's just so, we've been doing this for so many years now, too much to do. Yeah, other people's negative energy for sure. Someone yelling, that's a shortcut, absolutely. Anger in other people. Yeah. Feeling unseen, underappreciated, absolutely. Yeah, those are really big triggers for me too. Yeah, very reactive to others being harmed or harassed. Yeah, for me, it's a shortcut. It's almost like I'm wired to want to do something about that. Um, yeah, when someone's talking to me and I interpret it as a criticism, yeah, or overpowering, absolutely. When things don't go how I've planned, yeah. That's a tricky one for working in systems change. Things never go the way we've planned. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not. So I'm just going to give you another few seconds to write down anything else that feels alive for you. Beautiful. So there's this beautiful quote that Lou and I love by Viktor E. Frankl. He's a neurologist, a psychologist, and a Holocaust survivor. And he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And this was a sea change for me in my humaning and in my leadership. Back in the day when I was younger, I was working during the Arab Spring. It was really dangerous and chaotic. It was really the definition of complex and uncertain and volatile. And I made all the leadership mistakes. I was leading from in front. I had a PhD in burnout. I was so specialized in burnout. I was burning out every few months. I was burning out my teams. I was even burning out the other organizations I was working with. And it's because I didn't understand that there is this space between stimulus, the thing happening, and the response, my reaction to it. For me, they were one and the same thing. Something would happen and I would react. And it was amazing that no one died on my watch. It was very possible. I would never do that again. And I'm so grateful for this gift, the work that we're doing together in working with the nervous system and the other things that really allowed me to consciously choose my response. So yes, something can happen, and yes, it can absolutely shock me, and yes, my nervous system will register all of that. And I don't have to immediately react, which is from my habits. I can respond. And that response, the question that Lou and I often talk about is what is valuable here? Or as Tara Brach would say, what is love asking of me here? And that's such a powerful question to ask because often it's not to, finish making the point or prove yourself right. Often it's just to create a space for everyone to kind of self-regulate, to be in a space of possibility before we continue. That really is, available to us, and it is available if we cultivate it. And this has really been the biggest kind of shift in my own personal experience of life, my own quality of well-being, and also in my leadership is to really grow that space between stimulus and response. So we are going to practice a self-regulation exercise, friends, but I'm going to share a couple first. How do we come from fight, flight, or freeze back into a state of possibility? Well, that's what these exercises are for. The first one I'm going to name that we won't practice is 4-7-8 breathing. It's really easy. You breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 7 seconds, and you breathe out for 8 seconds. This is a favorite of the Navy SEALs when they're in deployment, and it is also a great tool when you want to sleep at night. It's a bit tricky to do it first because it's kind of counterintuitive to breathe out over 8 seconds duration and to breathe in over 4 seconds. But with a bit of practice, you'll get it right. Highly recommend 4-7-8 breathing. And what I love about it is that you can do this in the middle of a meeting and no one will notice that you're changing your breath. The one that we will practice today is coherent breathing. And there's a lot of research around this from the HeartMath Institute. Coherent breathing has been shown to synchronize your kind of breathing rate with your heart rate, with your brain rhythms and your nervous system. And so if you look at the kind of research, when they've kind of wired up all these people, there's these beautiful sine waves between all three, kind of just beautifully flowing across the screen. Very powerful tool. We'll be doing that together today. Another one that I'll share is fire breathing, and this is really good for when you're a bit down and you need a bit of a pickup. When you're feeling a bit flat or you've gotten some news that's kind of knocked you out a bit. I will say, please be careful with this one. Fire breathing can easily lead to dizziness and maybe even fainting if you're not careful. So I'll explain to you how to do it, and I will ask you to do some research before you do it, just so that you are aware, a bit more aware. This one's pretty simple too. You do 2 sharp inhales through your nose and then 1 fast exhale. So it looks something like this. So that's 2 sharp inhales through the nose, 1 sharp exhale. Don't do it for more than a minute. I mean, you might not even be able to do it for a minute. And like I say, please research it first. But if you do some fire breathing, you'll find yourself quite energized quite quickly. It's a great tool as well. And then the last one I'll share with you today is Qigong shaking. Again, this is another one to activate you. You've probably seen this or done this before in facilitation, but you start by shaking your wrists and then your elbows and then your shoulders, and then you should be standing up. So you'll just end up kind of shaking on your heels, bouncing into your heels. Your whole body will be shaking at a certain point, and you just keep shaking for 2 or 3 minutes. And then if you pause, you'll feel these beautiful sensations kind of moving through the body. That's the nervous system. You actually get to experience what in Chinese medicine they call qi. So those are 4 simple tools that you can use. If you do go for the breathing route, a little pro tip is if you just increase your exhale to longer than your inhale, that's one of the really powerful signals to your nervous system that you're safe. So in a meeting, in a session, in a collaboration, if something's going wrong, you can just deepen your inhale and especially deepen the exhale. And that'll be a cue to your nervous system. Hey, I'm okay, things are fine, things will start to settle down. So with that being said, we're going to move into a practice. At this point, I would invite you to find a comfortable seated position, if that's available to you. And great to have your feet flat on the ground, if that works for you, with your kind of knees above your feet, your shoulders above your hips, so that you're kind of aligned. And if you have it available to you, you can close your eyes or lower your gaze, whatever feels more comfortable. Please also feel free to switch off your cameras if that supports you. And just invite you to kind of sense into your feet and get grounded. And before we do the practice, my first invitation is just sense into your body now. What are some of the things that you're feeling in your body, in your emotional system and in your mind? So you might be sensing a tightness or an openness in the body, maybe some tension in the shoulders or jaw. Maybe there's a sense of excitement or anxiety that we're doing this practice. And maybe there's some thoughts in our heads around what we still have to do today. So just pay attention to that. And perhaps you can name them. And then I'm going to play the coherent breathing track. And you're going to breathe in as the music goes up in pitch and breathe out as the music goes down in pitch. My invitation to you is to breathe in fully on the inhale. So by the time the music has reached its peak, your belly, the bottom of your belly is full. And by the time the music has gone all the way down, your belly is fully empty. And I'll kind of cue you in. So just getting ready to take our first breath. And I am just going to make sure that I have shared my volume. So I'm going to stop sharing quickly and reshare. There we go. So I'm going to count you in. Getting ready to breathe. Breathing in. All the way to the bottom of the belly. Breathing out. All the way out. Breathing in. Breathing out. Breathing in. Out. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Before you open your eyes, just invite you to sense in again to your bodies, to your hearts and to your minds, and just see if there's any change in the experience. Is there a sense of tightness or openness that's different? Are you feeling more energized or more relaxed? Just sensing into the body to see what's different for you. And just making a mental note. And the reason that we do this is that we really want the conscious and the unconscious minds to know that this is a really useful practice to us if it works for us. Yeah. So Claudia's saying grief diminished. Yeah. In your own time, you can come back to the space that we have together. And so that was just 2 minutes of coherent breathing. So whenever you're ready, you can come back to the universe again, back to the beautiful people that we're here with today. And there we go. So just a little quick reflection on how do you feel? How did this breathing impact you? Just going to give you a minute for this. And again, when you're doing these kind of practices, it's useful to check in before and after. Before to see what it's like now, after to see the change. It also helps your conscious and your unconscious know, hey, this is actually something I can use when things are a bit tough. It's more likely that we'll use it in that way. So I see some comments here. Space and gratitude. Struggle to keep pace with the sounds, but much calmer. Yeah, once in a while you have to kind of get into it, the rhythm of this. More relaxed, a break from thoughts, more relaxed and calm. Have a good buzzing. Good buzzing is always good. Yeah, so coherent breathing is so easy to do. We will share this with our friends at Co-Creative, the video, so that you can use it. It's great to use with teams. Highly recommend kind of using this for a couple of minutes when things are a bit funky. And we would like to invite you into breakouts, friends. So, we've kind of thrown a lot at you today. Around well-being, around navigating complexity, and around working with your nervous system. And what we would love for you to talk about in your breakouts are exactly these things. You might also want to add any practices that support you in coming from a state of fight or flight into kind of a self-regulated state. So I believe we'll have kind of around 10 minutes for you to kind of connect in breakout rooms. And I will ask our breakout fairies to activate the rooms, and we'll see you on the other side. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Yeah.
Good to have you back. There's some grins, so I imagine some juicy stuff was shared. This is a great time to share exactly that juicy stuff that you're all smiling about. So I would love to hear from a few of you what is alive for you in this conversation now? What insights have you had? What has been interesting for you? What hasn't worked for you? All of that stuff. Feel free to unmute yourselves and jump in. Todd, was that a I'm gonna go?
No, it was a like offering for one of my colleagues to go. Like Simca, you seemed alive and by what Russ was saying. I was just kind of like, you want to say that again? Or
Sure. First of all, Adam and Lou, thank you so much. Good to
Yeah.
see you. I did not know you were the presenters today, so that was a pleasant surprise. What I was saying is, based on Russ's sharing, so I want to thank Russ and give him credit for, kind of bringing this forth again in me, but just that this capacity to work with our nervous systems, it really does feel, that phrase like the future calling us forward. It really does feel like this is an evolutionary ask. This is, if we think about complexity in the world and where we're at and the gap between the two, well, the world's not going to get any less complex. So the need for us to then expand our capacity to hold it. And this just feels like an evolutionary call. And, I just love the notion of how it's spreading in so many places that would not be talking about this stuff, 5 years ago, even probably, right? So thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing, Simca. It turns out we have bodies and that they might kind of influence things.
Not
It's
just
great that the scientists have caught up with that fact that, yeah. Yeah, and change happens in biological time. So it's so beautiful that these conversations are happening and growing. Yeah. Suparna?
Thank you. This couldn't have been better timed. I had one of the hardest experiences I've had this year, yesterday morning, and it was so interesting. Like, I know this stuff, right? But when you're having it intellectually, like knowing in the moment can help. I think what helps is practice. And I hadn't been doing my breath work, my even 10 minutes. I had been deprioritizing for like a host of issues. Oh, I'm gonna come back to it. And in the moment, it was that muscle memory that really helped. So the things that were coming up, like for the 4 questions, insights around well-being, I think like constant tracking, like you can do everything all at once, all the time, but at least having that infrastructure of care that's built over time, okay, like the social infrastructure, because we do things that are kind of repeated in our schedule, right? And so rather than yeah, I just need the building blocks already there versus trying to think of everything when the time arises. That was one thing. I think complex times, like Simca said, there's never going to be a time that I'm not going to deal with complexity. And that's like a feature of living systems. And so how do I then increase my capacity? I think also yesterday I realized the stories in that moment, there were actually many stories popping up, and instinctively picking the story that drives the greatest well-being in that moment was actually quite helpful. And it allowed me to take the action to kind of switch into more of a place of health. And the actions I took actually kind of created muscle memory for next time. So that was interesting. Yeah. And also the last thing is we're not alone, because the experience I had, I looked up on it, and it's 1 in 10 people have it in a year. It's apparently the flu. It was a panic attack while driving. I'm just going to say it because it was brutal. And I've never said this, and saying this aloud in this space is kind of really strange for me. But what I realized is it kind of takes his hold off me yeah. So that was that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing, friend. And sorry that you experienced that. You mentioned that we're in this together. There's a really beautiful practice by Kristin Neff called Mindful Self-Compassion. You probably know it. There's tons of YouTube videos. If you use Insight Timer, there's one on there, but it's a beautiful way to just take care of ourselves. Yeah, we're in this together. And on that note, it's so beautiful when you see organizations using this content like Co-Creative. So I have a crush on those guys. And you see a team co-regulating, a team regulating each other. So when you have a really cool tribe to work with, they can support you in that more. Yeah, would love to hear anything else that's coming up for anyone.
All right. Good. So then you will give me, oh, sorry. Somebody was speaking.
No, I
Sarah,
don't
go
know.
ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
We had a really nice conversation, and two pieces of wisdom that were given to me by my group. One was Lavera. I had asked the question, even if, because I'm a professor and I teach undergraduates, and they're really, they don't have much of this skill, and it's really challenging to figure out how to say, hey, I have all these great ideas from mindfulness or whatever, and you need them. How do I convince them? Where's the buy-in? But even if I can teach them about nervous systems and the window of tolerance and triggers and Viktor Frankl's beautiful quote, they then it's like, what do they do next? And they're also experiencing just a lot of burnout and all kinds of mental health problems. So I just feel really powerless in helping them get there. And Lavera had mentioned something to me, to the group, about once they're in that state, they can tap into wisdom. And I love the idea of wisdom being in my students already and inviting that in some way. And then their other person, Emma, mentioned that when she feels very overloaded at the system level problems, that there are ways that she can walk into her everyday choices with thinking about what's right in front of her and how she can act in a way that supports a different system in her immediate environment, at a small scale. So thank you for those beautiful pieces of wisdom for my group.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all for your sharing, for your presence, for your quality of presence. I want to actually just take a couple of minutes to leave with you two additional great resources. One is, and actually let me share my screen really quick. Let me see if I'm doing it. One is the Mindfulness for Changemakers community. This is a community of practice where we explore how mindfulness can help us in our change making. It's free of cost. We meet twice a month and on Thursday mornings. So you can register here at this website here. I'm going to put it also in the chat. And then the second resource I want to offer is the Wellbeing Wheel. We use this for self-assessment, and it has the 8 dimensions I spoke about earlier based on the human basic needs. And you can assess yourself by marking from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest level, where you feel you find yourself in the wheel. And so you might find areas where you are shining and great and you're a 5, and some areas where you might need some attentions. And here I'm going to give you an example of one well-being wheel, how it will look like. So you can look, oh, I'm a 2, I can do some more stuff here, or I'm doing great in contribution. And so the 2 resources are now on the chat, I think. I hope that this session was useful, and I'm going to pass it over to Marta to help us close.
Thank you, Lou, and thank you, Adam. This has been an incredibly rich session, and the conversations and the thoughts that are coming up are reflective of that. And before we fully close with Melissa, I actually wanted to invite all of us to share a reflection or a gift in the chat, something that you would like to share. So whether it's an appreciation, an affirmation, an intention, something that you'd like to offer to this space that was beautifully curated and enriched by the conversations. And we're gonna give ourselves a minute before we then pass the word to Melissa. If anyone wants to unmute, it's also possible to do that and hear your voice. That'd be beautiful. I see comments of gratitude, much gratitude for the group. Also some resources that we all will be sharing in the follow-up email. Thank you all. And Melissa, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Marta. And thank you again, everyone, for spending what felt for me like a very generative 90 minutes together. I do want to share again that we'll be curating the resources and the reflections that you all shared in chat and also in our polling tool. And in the next few days, you'll be receiving an email from me, so look for that. We'll also include a recording of the session. We want you to spend time with one another and also with us. So in the slide deck that you'll receive towards the end of the deck, so that you have all of the great content that Adam and Lizette shared with us today, there are also places where you can learn more about the Academy. You can learn more about Co-Creative. There's a link to subscribe to our newsletter. We'd love to stay in touch with you. Being in community is such a beautiful and blessed thing that we get to do. And we're looking forward to more opportunities so that this isn't a goodbye. It's really more of a we'll see you later. So thanks again.
Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Be well, friends.
Thank you all. Be well.
Bye, Manuela.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.